everybody, this is Ann. Welcome back to Painting Big. So here we are with our video on how to highlight metallics. This is going to be an interesting one, so strap in. Let's get to it. Okie dokie, people. So the first thing we have to talk about is that there is a big difference between metallic flakes and pigments. When you are dealing with mica-based metallics, and that's going to be things like your Pro Acro, your Reaper, those things. Most like artist paints that have metallics, those are all mica. A lot of different metallics. Especially, like, I think before this, Vallejo was the only one with aluminum flakes, but then Army Painter with their new Fanatics, those are also aluminum flakes. So most metallics, like if you have older paint, most metallics back then were actually mica. So the thing about mica flake is that it does not cover at all. It has zero coverage. Like, if you build it up a lot, sure, but you have to put on so many layers to get there. Let me show you. So I have here a little bit of Reaper's new metallic medium. We've got a bunch of these coming out with 2.0. The great thing about metal mediums is that you can make your own metallics with them. This is the silver medium, which actually is a white flake. Almost all silvers are made with white flake when you're doing mica. When you're dealing with aluminum flake, the natural color of the aluminum flake is actually a silver. So then you are not dealing with a white flake at that point. So I have a bit of that metallic medium. That's essentially just flake in base. And I'm going to grab a little bit out of my brush here. And we're going to grab this model. And let's see here. Let's try just to put it right here. Let's get a little closer. And I can put a stripe of it right here. And we can see a shine, but if I turn it, you can't see that stripe at all. It has no coverage. It only gives you shine. So when we move back, there's that stripe. See it? Again, it isn't there. And that's full strength. I did not thin this paint at all. I can see it. Essentially, when the light hits it, I can see it clearly. When the light is not hitting it, I cannot see it. Now, obviously, this could give you some cool effects with metallics, right? You could actually use this just to highlight where you wanted the shine to come up when the light hits it and keep your wash elsewhere, right? Like, there we go. So I put that in there. Now, here again, if I put it this way, you can maybe see a tiny trace of something lighter here, a tiny trace maybe, but you get the idea, right? You really only see it when the light hits it. Now, this has a lot in common with if you guys have ever used color shifting paints. If you remember the ones that you could get a while ago and probably still can get, you have to add a lot of layers, right? They usually recommend applying it in an airbrush, and they tell you to put on a lot of layers for the best result. And this is why, is because the flake itself is absolutely transparent until you build up a lot of layers. But yeah, so essentially if I keep applying this metal medium, eventually it'll look a little lighter down here on the bottom. So you think you see it until I tilt it away from the light, and then you realize, no, you really can't see it hardly at all. So I'd have to put many, many layers of this on in order to really build it up to the point where it would be a blended effect, right? So what does that mean, Anne? Well, folks, that means that when you actually do put a metallic highlight down and you can actually see it, you are actually seeing the result of the pigment in the paint. And what this tends to mean is, it's very counterintuitive, but it means that you're actually going to be able to layer up highlights better using a darker metallic instead of a lighter one. And the reason for this, remember, we start with a white flake. So what happens when we get this this darker gray? This means it has more pigment. When you have more pigment, it actually will layer better because it's got the pigment in there, right? The pigment is going to layer. The shine's going to be the same no matter what, which is why you never get a smooth transition, right? You can always see your brush strokes because the minute the light hits it, you see the flake. And if you've built it up, you see? So if you've got that layering stroke and it's almost invisible, and then you pull it up, right? You've got that invisible stroke with that little bit of color, right? That's the layering brush stroke. But when you've got this metallic flake floating around, even the start of your brush stroke leaves some of that flake, so you don't get a smooth transition. But you will get a better blended effect in general if you've got more pigment, because paints that have very little pigment in them, they'll tend to streak when you try to thin them for layering. So this is the weird side effect. So actually you need to thin these a little bit more. Sometimes you even should add a little bit of pigment to them, like adding a little bit of white pigment to them will make them layer a little bit better. But adding pigment also makes the color go a little dimmer. The flake goes a little dimmer, right? So pigment gets really in between the light and the flake, and it dulls that flake. That's why when you have a paint that's really dark, if it's not actually a dark flake, it's going to seem like it's dimmer. It's not going to have as much of a shine. So you've got all these trade-offs is what it comes down to. Now when you're dealing with aluminum flake metallics, let's get these guys out. That would be the Fanatic Army Painter, the old Model Air Chrome, and the Vallejo Metal Color. So these guys have zero transparency. So they're the opposite. Instead of being completely transparent, they are completely opaque. No matter how much you thin these colors, they will not blend for you. They will not layer. You'll never, they will be strong until the flake completely falls out of solution, and then it's just going to go to pieces. But so that's why these are so good at texture, but they're terrible. You just can't layer with them. You've got to do textured effects in order to layer. You have to be willing to deal with the texture. So 2 very different flake types, right? For 2 very different effects. And the challenge in highlighting metallics is knowing which effect you want. Which flake am I going to use right now to get the effect that I want? So I've got one other little bit of information to give you guys, and that is when you're trying to identify the color of the flake, look at the shine. Look at the color of the shine of the paint. When we look at the shine on this, it's definitely white, right? It comes up really, really, really bright white. And you can even see that when you look at where I put it right there. It's a white color, right? So when you look at a gold paint, it's actually going to be bright yellow. And that's what that's telling you, is it's telling you the color of the flake. So if you put a drop of the paint on the cap and you kind of go back and forth with it, if you see a red color, then it's an interference red flake. If you see a blue color, it's usually interference blue, which means it's a translucent flake that's been coated with one of those colors. Reaper has a couple of other flakes. We have kind of a graphite colored flake that we use for our gunmetal blue and our adamantium black, and that's going to come off with a darker gray shine. If you, actually I've got a good example here in the Pro Acryl. This is white gold. It's a really pale gold, but when you look at it, look at that shine. It's white. So what that means is they've actually added yellow and brown pigments to this to shift it toward gold, but it's a white metallic underneath. So I bring this up because when you're looking to highlight metallics, kind of look at the flake. You can usually use a white flake to highlight almost anything. You can even mix those colors together. You could mix a white and a blue flake. You can mix a white and a gold flake even to make a kind of an electrum color, almost like this. But if you look at your green metallic and you notice it has a yellow shine, then you know you can use golds to highlight that because that green is made with a gold flake. Likewise, if you look at a red or a copper and it looks like it has a yellow highlight instead of an orange highlight, you know you can highlight it with gold then. And with something like this, where it's a white gold, where it kind of looks like a gold, a really like an electrum color, but you can see the shine is white, you know that the white flake can be used to highlight this. All right, let's actually get stuck in. So I wanted to talk about dry brushing first, because to be very honest, dry brushing metallics is a totally fair technique. It's been used for ages to good effect. And I wanted to say that, when given the choice, I prefer to dry brush with this stuff instead of dry brushing with a mica metallic, like one of these guys. And the reason is that I find that mica metallics, because you're depending upon the pigment, I find that it can be a little streaky, and you can get that gritty texture sometimes with the, just like you get when you dry brush any paint. Whereas when you're dealing with specifically the metal color here, it is extremely fluid. So let me put a drop down and show you guys. it's really watery. Super watery. See that? Water. It's like water with flake in it. But what this means is that when you put just a tiny bit on your brush and then you unload it, and I recommend unloading it a lot. You want to have very little of this on your brush, but you can get really smooth dry brushing. And I'll show you a finished piece I did, but I want to show you just a tiny bit. I'm using a filbert brush here. Gonna unload, unload, unload. Gonna unload, unload, unload. Really unload it, because this stuff is really potent. And let's do the kind of the breastplate on this. And I'm going to test it over here and make sure that it's really lightweight. Okay, good. You can see that, you can hardly see it, but there's the shine. So I'm going to gently hit this breastplate with it. And I'm going to build it up. And what happens with this stuff is, because remember the flake is opaque, so you can actually slowly build up those highlights. And you are getting some coverage in addition to the shine. Might need to reload just a little bit. The more you have on the brush, the more likely you're unfortunately going to, smudge something or leave a big blob. So just be very careful. But the less you have, the more delicate you can be about picking out details. And once we got that, so you can see that brings out those details really well on that breastplate. It's just a beautiful finish. Plus, because it's such a fine flake, it's just a beautiful smooth finish. So you can see that leaves. It's still dry brushing. I could come back and pick out if some of that got into these cracks between where the wash was. But even so, this is a beautifully smooth result. So that works really, really well. If you're good at dry brush, like honestly, this is a huge bottle too. This metal color comes in such a big bottle. It's over a fluid ounce. And most of these guys are more like half a fluid ounce. So, but this is the white aluminum. And there is a gold, but I'm not sure how good it is. I haven't actually used it. I really love this for silvers. I tend to use more traditional metallics for gold. So speaking of traditional metallics, let's try to layer a little bit. I'm gonna grab, let's grab the Pro Acryl actually and try to bring up something around here. Oh, here's my other dry brushing thing that I did. So I actually dry brushed that metal color over our peacock armor here. I call it peacock because of the colors. But you see that it actually, where it's really thin, you can still see that green and purple through it a little bit. But it does cover over. Otherwise, it covers over all the splotches, like any irregularities that may be here from your wash. That aluminum flake is going to smooth out and cover over all that. So if you did leave some splotches and just some irregularities from your washes, you'll be able to cover that up. So when I would be done with, if I dry brush this whole thing, I would have some of that purple and green still, but it would be a silver model with the purple and green in the shadows, which could be really cool. I could also use the inks that I used for this, the acrylic inks, and I could use just a little bit mixed into a white metallic to make the colors, like make a really pale purple one. I haven't experimented a lot with this, with the aluminum flakes, to see how amenable they are to this, but probably would work just fine. It works just fine with these guys. The thing about it is that when I'm doing this video, I keep having to think about metallics don't photo well. And so it's easier for me to show you guys how this stuff works when I'm working with a model like this, which is matte. This is the matte wash we did. Whereas when I'm doing this one, which is shiny wash, you can see it, right? It becomes very hard to see your highlights because the light is interfering. You can't see the paint marks as much. So if you wonder why I keep reaching for that matte model, that's why. Oh, here's it's kind of globby, so I decided to open it up and just grab some. But here's it's quite old, this Pro Acryl white gold, but that's the color of it. It's kind of a pewter color, actually. Let's grab a little bit out on a brush, and I'll see if I can get it to layer somehow. Now, that you're going to get the best results from this, honestly, if you stick to colors that are close to each other. Actually, this white gold is a pretty color. It's the reason I got it. That's it. It's kind of soft and champagne colored. However, this is definitely becoming a bit thick with age. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some drops of water in it. And you can keep metallics alive for a very long time if you just remember that when you notice that they're getting thicker, just start dropping in. Drop in like 10 drops. It helps if they have an agitator in them, but even if they don't, just adding the water will help shake it up a bit. Great. Okay, put a drop of water in there. Yeah, I put a drop of water in my metallics. I can also, it's because I've got a lot on the brush here, so I was hoping it wouldn't make it drop out of solution too bad. I think it'll be okay. I don't think this color is going to work on the gold, but I'm going to try it anyway. So there it is. It's still staying in solution. You're not seeing it drop too badly. I found I got better results, to be very honest, through thinning more rather than thinning less for metallics. Like I said, they tended to be streakier. If I had them stay thicker, I'm going to pick up some paint on my brush. Let's see if we can just highlight the knee pad here. So essentially you're going to see brush marks. You might see some streakiness. However, the gloss, you see how hard it is to even see what I'm doing here because of the gloss. So, all right, let's try it over here. Yeah, so we can put this white gold up here. We can thin it down. There's still going to be a pretty sharp divide between the wash, which is more matte, and the paint, which is less matte. So let's see if I can get close so you guys can see. So, all right. Do you see? I'm turning it until I can see those brush strokes, dang it. All right. Yeah. Do you see those brush strokes there? Yeah, so you can see it a little bit, but it definitely, see how high that shine is now since I added that, it pops. Unlike, you know, the other part of it right down here, which, you know, if I move it, it still has a gleam underneath the armor, but it's not, in person, I'll tell you, it's not nearly as bright as this. So I would layer it up. I would go up just a little bit at a time. From here, I might go to a pure white metallic. However, even though the remember this color of this metallic has very little to do with the color of this armor, it's actually kind of a white gold, right? And yet, it looks fine on here, and that's because the flake is white. I'm not even really seeing the gold. So I'm seeing a little bit of the patchiness there, you can kind of see it. But again, it's just wherever you put the metallic, you're just going to see more of a shine, especially. This is why, like, I really prefer to work metallics with a matte wash over them so that I can, any place I highlight then comes up with a shine. So if you really want your metallics to be smoother, honestly, airbrushing is the way to go if you need a perfect smoothness. If you want to build them up and you want to try for a smoother finish, I would recommend using kind of a bunch of metallics that are all like close to each other and slowly working them up. For example, you know, maybe you start with, these guys are pretty close together. They were part of a triad. You start with that, then you go to that, then you go to maybe this plus a white metallic, like our pearl white. But keep them pretty close together because then the brush strokes aren't going to show as much. But the only other way to really keep things, like kind of keep your transitions smooth, honestly, almost the better way to do so, is by starting with a very light color and just working down with layering. So like if I had, instead of putting washes on this model, if I had decided to just layer in the blue and brown and I had left my areas I wanted the highlights to show up, I had left those areas just the metal color, that would give me an opportunity to probably create a smoother effect because it's easier to layer with paint than it is to layer with metallics. I will mention there are some tricks here. And the tricks involve alcohol-based metallics. Now, alcohol-based metallics usually use actual metal flake. And Vallejo does, I think, a alcohol-based gold and an alcohol-based steel or silver. They are actual metal flakes, and they can actually be burnished once they are down. That's what the alcohol base lets you do. But they are solvent-based, so you have to be willing to go with that. And if you want really cool shading effects, you use oil paints over those. And the oils, you can just buff those right. Like you lay them down, and then you can just take a Q-tip or whatever and buff them off at the highlights. You can get super smooth transitions because, of course, the oil paint's going to take a while to dry. You can just slowly buff it until you get that perfect transition from your oil paint shadow to the metal where you just buff it clean. So those tricks exist, and if you're willing to work with solvents, that is one way to get amazing metallic effects that historical painters have known about for a very long time. They used to do it on metal models where they would just leave the metal and not paint over it, and then they would put oil washes or oil glazes over the top of it, and then they would work it. So they would actually be burnishing the metal. They wouldn't even bother with metallic paints. So yes, you can get some cool effects if you're willing to work with solvents. And technically, you could use oils in the same way over acrylic metallics, because you put oils over acrylics. Acrylics over oils don't work as well because of the hydrophobic nature of the oils. I've heard some people tell me they do it. I haven't tried it, so I can't vouch for it. But yeah, using, if I put down a layer of this metal color and then I went over it with oil paint, I could do the same trick where maybe I took just my little brushes and I very gently removed and buffed off the oil paint to just leave the metallic showing. Kind of like I showed you with the washes where I pulled it off of one leg. You can do the same thing with oil paint, but then you keep that beautiful, smooth, buffed look once it's dry. So yeah, all those things to consider. So lots of tips and tricks. Let's do some textured highlighting and weathering. So again, I'm just going to use my metal color because I've got it out. This is stuff I would do with aluminum-based metallics like the Model Air, the Fanatic, and the metal color. But since I have the metal color already on my palette, I'm just going to use that. Again, it's very watery. You can see it's totally separated out. But all I have to do is mix it up a little bit. Grab my really fine brush. I'm going to get closer so you guys can see. So there are two brush strokes that I tend to use for textured effects, and one is stippling and one is hatching or cross hatching. And I just need to get a little bit of paint on my brush, and I can stipple highlights on. And even though these will be extremely opaque, too small of an area. Let's go over here. And these will be very opaque, so you're going to be able to see these little things that I'm putting on. So you can build up texture. And it's not smooth, but it's a way to build up highlights on this stuff. So kind of like that. And then the other one is one I did over, you can see this also on this side. I was playing around with all these effects before I came to do this video for you. Stippling also works on the knee pad here. It's also kind of fun to use it on like shields. It can create kind of a hammered metal look if you're consistent about it. And here we're doing cross hatching on the lower legs. You can see that. So essentially you're taking a very thin, light brush. There we go. I need a little more paint on my brush. So you can make little lines. And then you can go and you can either leave them as just do straight lines. Like this is kind of a comic book style technique. You just kind of fade your lines out as they go further back. And that can get kind of a brushed steel look, as you can see. Or you can do the crisscross like I did over there. And then it'll kind of all blur together. You can see the edges there. And you can carry those as deep as you want into your shadows and layer them as close or as far apart as you like. See that crosshatch. And so those are the two kind of textured strokes I would use. And then the last thing I wanted to show you, and you'll see a picture of this also, I did this up here on this guy, but it's weathering. So alcohol-based metallics are, let me actually grab my model chrome because I'm going to mix it in with the Vallejo. I want it a little thicker. Mix it in with the metal color. I do love the chrome for this too. It's a little bit thicker. If you don't like the really watery nature of the metal color, then go for the Model Air Chrome. And so here, if we wanted to create a weathering effect, we could do some little slashes. Let's see, those show up. Even if I want to suggest that crisscrossing scratches over on this side. And this works well even on big stuff, so. Again, you can see the problem with showing this on camera. There we go, see that. And then again, you can use those little stipples at the very edges to kind of break up and suggest abrasions on the edge of the panel. And again, this up here is where I was playing around with this stuff. You can see where I've done the little stippling. We can also put in stippled highlights up here on this plate. For those who have been watching my Golden Demon progress on my entry, you'll recognize this technique that I'm using with regular paints, not metallics. But yeah, doing little scratches and abrasions is a great way to introduce some weathering effects onto armor, especially when it's really beat up. This is the stuff that's really fun to do on like orcs, but also on like if you've got a Space Marine chapter and you want to suggest that they like are really have been through it, and their armor's getting really beat up. You can see how cool that can look. And you can only use the aluminum flake metallics for this. This does not work at all with mica. So it is a specialized tool, but hopefully you get the idea. It is really cool looking. Even if it means that you've got a bottle of metallic paint that you use for like this and nothing else. Although, like I said, we can also come in and I mentioned earlier put in a highlight, say on a kneecap, with mica-based paint. And then when you need to really nail that highlight to make sure that it shows up even when the light isn't hitting it directly. So you can kind of see there that you can kind of see it's not smooth, right? It's got a little bit of texture to it. But that's when you grab metallic and maybe you put a dot right up where you want your highlight to be, right? Your main highlight. And that's going to be opaque. That dot will then be opaque. So there we go. It's going to look a little smoother then at the top of the knee where we want the light to fall. So you can combine these techniques just like you combine regular paint techniques, right? We can start by layering with our mica-based metallics to get just a little bit of a transition and a focus so that our wash, especially if we're using washes, we've still got the color of the wash down here. Then we're layering in that mica-based metallic. And then for our highest point, we really want it to shine silver, really bright. So we grab our aluminum flake metallic and we put that up here so that this is always going to be bright no matter what. There we go. All right, guys, it's fraught. Highlighting metallics is kind of fraught. And it honestly, maybe you finally understand from this when I talk to you guys. I've said more than once that I find metallics to take more work to look good than non-metallic metals. This is why. This is why. It can be a lot of work to create metallic models, especially if you've got a lot of metal. It can take so much work to make them look good. And honestly, once you've worked with non-metallic metals for a while, like I have, it's just easier. It's just easier and faster to work with regular paint. Because the rules change when you work with metallics because of the qualities of the flake. All right, guys, this was quite a video. It's a long one, but I had a lot to cover. So hopefully it was valuable to you. As always, I've got a companion PDF for this on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/paintingbig. And I've got companion PDFs from all the previous videos that I've been doing. Usually it's the first video of the month that gets the PDF. So you can find all of that on the $2 tier at my Patreon. And if you just want to be notified when a new video goes up right away, because I know YouTube doesn't do that for us, just become a free member on my Patreon. It won't charge you anything, but you should get a notification then when I post something new. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great one, and I'll see you again soon. This is Anne, signing off.